Hi, everybody. So excited to have our next guest speaker here in NKT 355 Sports Selling and Sales. Um, TJ is a friend of mine, and as I mentioned to you guys, really excited to have. And I asked him a lot of favors actually, just because number one, I think he's got sort of a really interesting story as it relates to um, being able to quickly work in three different professional leagues, but also now has experience that you don't see that often in sales, working in ticket sales, premium sales, and now in corporate sales. So TJ is now currently working for the Washington Nationals as the manager of corporate partnerships or corporate partnership sales. So I'm really excited to have him join us. And so thanks for coming, TJ.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right, so why don't you just start off telling the class a little bit about yourself and your background? I mean, obviously I know your story, but I think that it's worth them hearing about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm originally from Lansdale, Pennsylvania. I went to North Penn High School. And while there, I played football. So while playing there, it earned me a scholarship to go play football out at Shippensburg University. So I was at Shippensburg from 2012 through 2016, and played football out there as well. But very quickly realized that there was life after football and knew that I wanted to stay in sports. So while I was at Shippensburg, I actually was able to intern with the Philadelphia Union soccer team. So the summer of 2016, I became an event operations intern for the union, and very quickly realized that that was grassroots marketing, going to travel soccer tournaments, and very much just spreading the word about the union back then, because at that point they'd only been roughly about, I think, 6 or 7 years old.
Right.
Um, so was very much just out in the market, getting people to understand who we were. But by doing that, I very much realized that I wasn't really getting the chance to network with anybody inside the front office other than the person who was overseeing my internship. So while I was interning, I made it known to the other interns that I wanted to get the chance to kind of meet people inside the front office. And the ticket sales intern at the time, but at the time, internships were unpaid. I know that's not the case anymore. But the ticketing intern at the time needed a part-time job because he was only doing the internship. So he took up a camp counselor job halfway through the summer from 8 to 12, and asked if I would be the ticketing intern in the meantime. So I accepted and got the chance to kind of meet people in the front office and made sure that I was learning as much as I possibly could, knowing that, I was only there for roughly 4 hours in the morning. But in the process of doing so, I got the chance to meet the director of groups, meet people in the corporate partnerships department, and through just picking their brain and learning as much as I could, there was a ticket competition essentially back then, where the record was 230 tickets sold by an intern, and I had sold 180. So didn't necessarily break the record by any means, but I sold to 49 different people where they said that was the most that they'd ever seen. So from that, they asked if I would be interested in kind of sitting in on an inside sales workshop, where me looking for a job my last semester of school, I was like, yeah, absolutely, I'll sit in. So got the chance to kind of learn a little bit more about what ticket sales was all about, and kind of more of the characteristics as to what exactly people look for when getting into ticket sales. So at the end of the combine, the inside sales manager asked me, if this is something that I would be interested in pursuing for a career, where I told him yes, and he kept me on his list to interview for when I was officially graduated, because I did have to have one more semester in the winter or fall, I should say, of 2016. So come January of 2017, I did start in inside sales, and was driving my beat up 1993 Dodge Dakota 43 miles one way from Lansdale, Pennsylvania, all the way to Chester every day. And needless to say, that really killed that truck, and I miss it dearly. But you live and you learn. So very much learned that in ticket sales, you need to be coachable, need to, show that you can pick up a phone and call 99 times, knowing that you're going to get told no 99 times, but need to pick the phone up that 100th time. And very much show that, you're able to take the teachings and continue gritting it out because it's not an easy process. And inside sales back then, I can't speak on what it is today, but back then it was $8.50 an hour. So very much making sure that you're progressing and learning as much as you can in that time, and showing that you're able to, take the punches to then progress to the next level. So for me, that next level was season ticket sales. So I got promoted to the season ticket team and, was calling on mom and dad to buy season tickets or partial plans or groups to Philadelphia Union games. And while doing that, I very much found that I enjoyed talking to companies during that time, but also found that companies were spending more money than mom and dad on tickets. And me being who I very much enjoyed getting the bigger commission structure and commission paycheck. So I continued reaching out to companies, and that's actually how I met JP. I went to a networking event in Philadelphia. We went to, I believe it was a cigar or it was a whiskey tasting, wasn't it, JP?
Might have been. It was either that or it was like a pyramid club, maybe.
I think it was at the Pyramid Club, but I got invited by a client of mine, a painting company that I had sold season tickets to.
Yep.
And very much from there, started falling in love with the networking process and getting the chance to meet people and hear about what they do and how we could support them, whether that be through tickets, through myself, or through introductions that I could make to them based on other people that I was meeting. So from there, I was getting introductions to companies and also introducing myself to companies through these events, to the point where I got promoted then from our season ticket team to our premium team, where it was required for me to continue just working directly with companies. And that went from me selling season tickets to then selling more premium groups and suites, and more of our premium season tickets at the time, um, to those that were looking to entertain their top prospects, clients, and employees out at Subaru Park. So from there, continued doing that and ended up getting promoted then to the manager of premium seating. So I was overseeing all of the different clubs that they had there, kind of overseeing the menus that they did for um, that we had for our prospects and clients at the time, where I kind of got to a point where I knew that I was very good at what I did, but knew that I wasn't the best because I love being a student of the game. And I got hit up by the NFL. So at the time, the Commanders had reached out to me, saw what I was doing in MLS with the Philadelphia Union, and asked if I'd be interested in moving up to the NFL and selling suites at the highest level. Wasn't an easy decision because I'd been with the Union for roughly about 6 years at that point, but decided to take a chance on myself and knew that I was going to be going in and getting coaching from people who had been doing it a lot longer than myself. So decided to take a chance and going to arguably the hardest position in sports and selling under Dan Snyder and all the criticism that came with that for 2 years. And in the time that I was with the Commanders, I was actually able to secure a number of suite leases for millions of dollars. And I was actually the one that was able to find Northwest Federal Credit Union, and brought them on board as a partner of the team here last season. And for those of you that do follow it, they actually just became the naming rights partner for the team. So it's not FedEx Field anymore. It's now Northwest Stadium, but it's because of a relationship that I was able to bring to fruition from sweet conversations to a partnership. And then they liked it so much that they decided to up their partnership even more. But by being able to kind of walk them up the ladder that way, I was able to then find a role for myself in corporate partnerships because I found that I very much liked talking with companies and didn't want to limit myself only to season tickets or suites. where now if that is what a company wants, like we can absolutely discuss that, but now I get to actually talk with companies and figure out what it is that they value, what they truly care about. Where that could be brand visibility, where when you're walking around stadiums and you see branded bars or club spaces, or people handing out pamphlets or such on the concourses. They're doing that for a reason. It's trying to get in front of fans, trying to become more visible, trying to get people to use their services, their products. So every conversation that I have now, we're able to kind of figure out like what exactly it is that people are most passionate about, and then be able to amplify that on a scale in front of the fans that do come to the stadium.
TJ, I remember you telling me you're leaving for the Union. Remember I said, you sure you want to go to the Commanders?
Oh, I'm aware. Yeah, that was at we were at Newman University at a networking event there, if I'm not mistaken.
You sure you want to go? Because at that time, you remember, like the Union had just probably won the Community Shield, right?
Yep,
And they had a
they
winning.
just won the Supporter Shield. They just previously lost in the Eastern Conference Finals. The team was playing at an all-time high, and the year that I left was actually the year that they went all the way to the MLS Cup out in
Right.
Los Angeles. So yeah, I was hitting myself a little bit, but I very much was. I kept telling myself, I'm like, I did this for a reason. I wanted to continue growing my career, continue learning. So don't get me wrong, I wanted them to win because I was promised a ring, but unfortunately, it didn't play out that way.
Right.
2022 was kind of a year of heartbreak for Philadelphia sports, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's
So,
true. Um, all right, so I like, again, thank you for sharing your background because I think
of
you've got
course.
an interesting pathway. All right, so what would you say is the biggest difference between selling season tickets versus sponsorships?
So for sponsorships, it's more of a broader conversation at first because I get to very much hear exactly what people are going through. So when I talk to someone and I ask them like, why would something with the Nationals make sense? They're going to tell me it's because we want to get brand visibility in front of your fans. We like the demographic that you guys are working with. We're trying to increase our exposure in front of this generation. Or it could be something along the lines of you guys do a lot of work with youth baseball and giving back to the community. And we want to be associated with that and giving back to, youth sports or under-resourced areas. Like um, we have a youth baseball academy that's in a part of the city down here where kids are coming to us for after school programs and such, where they aren't necessarily in the best positions, where they grew up in an area where there's only one grocery store in a 5 mile radius. So we're able to provide give backs with food, give backs with education, and very much make sure that people are getting raised up the right way in these areas, where we're happy to and proud to say that we've got people that have come through our academies that have graduated and gone on to colleges on scholarships as well. So there's a lot of different things that I'm able to now do with corporate partnerships, whereas with tickets, it was more people are using them more for the business development in a sense. So people are using it to bring prospects out and build better relationships with them, bring clients out and show their appreciation for them for doing business. There's a lot of different ways that people are able to utilize suites and utilize tickets, whether that be for, as I mentioned, their clients, their prospects, or employees, and showing appreciation for employees in a time when turnover at companies is probably at an all-time high, given all of the return back to work and such. So people are looking for ways to motivate their employees, where that's where sports can come into play. But there's just an added element doing it with corporate partnerships compared to just suites and season tickets.
Yeah. So, I was telling them, again, knowing that, again, I've done both types of sales, tickets and then sponsorships. Um, and I've seen friends who transitioned from one role to another. And I always say the hardest thing to do was going from ticket sales where you're very sort of transactional. right?
Yep.
You get into that rhythm of it's a volume game, and the more calls you make, the more no's you get, the closer you are to a yes. And it's very sort of,
Exactly.
you live off of this sort of momentum almost of, right, of just grinding
Yep.
to going then into a sponsorship where it's not making 100 calls, it's making 5 right calls. And
Exactly.
it's not getting a quick sale, it's developing a 6 month relationship that then you plant the seeds as you go along, and eventually the fruits come to fruition, but you never know when, right?
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
so
I've what I've been told by my boss is that corporate partnerships, it's everything could make sense. I've had conversations already where I've done proposals and I've checked every box for a company based on exactly what they're telling me, and they tell me we can't do it. And there's no rhyme or reason, it's just a no. And but everything checked off. Whereas, in suites and ticket sales, because it is so transactional, you want to push back because you want the sale now. Whereas in corporate partnerships, you more so value the relationship that you're going to, not necessarily push back as hard, but at the same time, like you want to make sure that you're continuing to keep that relationship because it might not make sense now, but it could make sense 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road. So it's all very much making sure now at this point, keeping the book of business and keeping the relationship, because you don't know if that's going to pan out with you where you're at with your current team or somewhere down the line with another team as well.
right, right. So tell the students a little bit about the idea, because I try to tell them a little bit as well. Tell them a little bit about the importance of leverage in sales. So finding leverage and utilizing that leverage to close deals.
Yep. So I was actually talking about this the other day with a couple of my friends who are in sales. Like, you want to find ways to put yourselves not only above the competition, but against the people that you're also talking with too. So when I was with the Philadelphia Union, the best example was we had a program essentially towards the end of the year where if you bought season tickets, you could get 3 games for free for the remainder of the season. And I took that and I went, okay, great. Everyone that is doing this on our team is doing 3 games. That's fine. I'm going to give them 1 game. So when I would call someone, I would tell someone, look, like, we can go through the entire process, talk about their kids, talk about how many games they've made it to, the family time that they would want to come out with. And then we get to a point where I'm going in for the pitch and I say, look, if you put down 10% for season tickets right now, I can get you 1 game for free for the rest of the year. Some people would be like, "Oh my God, that's great! Yeah, absolutely! Like, let's sign up right now. Great, cool. I got to do 1 game with 2 games in my pocket where I didn't have to give them." Other people would be like, like I'm not sure. I would need to talk to someone. Battle that objection, and they come back to, I'm not positive. I would literally sit there and I'd put them on hold. I go, hold on, give me 1 second. I put them on hold, and I would talk to my coworker or something for like a second or two, and I'd get them back on the phone. I'd go, listen, I just talked to my manager. We don't usually do this, but I can get you 2 games for the rest of the season for free if you guys decide to go forward with these season tickets. Where in that situation, they're going, oh my God, I can get 2 free games as opposed to 1 free game. And people are only getting 1 free game when they sign up for this. Little do they know other people are getting 3 games. But it's making sure that I had something in my pocket to kind of pull out if somebody was on the fence or not willing to go forward. So it was very much a tactic that I was able to use to very much not only make sure that there was still availability for games going forward, but something that I was able to kind of very much take advantage of, and make sure that people were kind of feeling the excitement, feeling the momentum that we were having as a team, whether we were winning or not, but more so ways that we could provide value in those situations to people who were still looking to come out to games and able to save money through doing this, but at the same time maybe didn't realize what exactly they were signing up for at the time.
Okay. Let's shift gears a little bit. I'll open it up to the floor because again we want to be respectful of your time, and I appreciate you jumping in here.
Of
So
course.
let's yeah, Danny.
How's it going, TJ? Thanks
What's
for taking
going on?
So one question I had was through working through 3 different leagues, what is one thing that kind of stayed consistent and how did you use that to your advantage in the position you are now?
Yeah. So great question. What I've found is that like working in sports, especially on the ticketing side, um, you can honestly take all of that with you wherever you go. So what I found is that everything that I learned at the Philadelphia Union translated perfectly over to what I was doing over with the Commanders. And had I stayed in ticketing, probably would have translated perfectly over to what I was doing with the Washington Nationals, where when you're talking to people on the phones, like it's you're essentially just getting the chance to build trust with them. You're asking questions about their family. You're asking questions about, what their tendencies are in coming out to baseball games or football games or soccer games. You're asking, like who they usually come with, in very much finding ways to continue getting them to open up to you a little bit more, but finding ways to get them to just continue talking. Because what you're doing with every single one of the questions that you're asking on the phone is you're essentially using that then as leverage for when you do go to make a pitch. So, you tell me that you've got a family of four and your kids love soccer and they wake up in the mornings to watch EPL and ask you when you're going to your next game and such. By the time I get to the point then when, I'm pitching you guys based on what you're saying and how much you guys are spending, like we can help you save money by coming out to 9 games throughout the course of the season next year where you're saving money on parking, saving money on going to games. You mentioned that you're looking for ways to give back to family, and then they go, "Oh, like I'm not sure." And it's like, "Well, you said that Johnny wants to go to games. This is the perfect way, perfect Christmas gift, whatever it may be." That translates perfectly over to NFL as well too, where you're using people's passions and what people are telling you on the phones to convince them that this is something that makes sense for them. Like that's ultimately what it is because for sports, like selling sports, it's not a need, it's a want. So what we're doing on the phone is very much just amplifying that want to a point where it almost feels like it is a need.
Yeah, it's a good question. Who else? Nick, what you got?
I don't know much about the DC sports culture, but obviously Philly, you're local to here as well. It's filled with passion. There's a lot of demand for tickets amongst all the 5 teams. What was it like as you transitioned from Philly to the DC area? As there has not been much success with the Commanders in recent years up until this year. They're kind of a little bit of a standout. And how did you have to change your selling tactics if you did at all?
Yeah, no, good question. So I can say that from the two markets, I can say that everybody loves a winner. Like that is by far and away like the biggest thing. Like you can look at attendance records right now too. So if you had to guess of all the teams in the city, like the Flyers are probably not drawing as big a crowd right now as the Eagles. Eagles tickets, while they've been sold out for season ticket holders for years and years and years, back in the Chip Kelly days, like tickets were probably a little bit more affordable to find on the secondary market at that time too. The Phillies, before they signed Bryce Harper, Maikel Franco was the star player on those teams. And I can vividly recall I went to games for like $15. Like winning is ultimately the thing that cures all. But as a front office employee, you essentially change just the way that you're talking about it on the phones. So when I was with the Philadelphia Union, I'm talking about hope. I'm talking about, we are building these players up in the academy, and very much pitching the idea kind of the same way the Sixers did in the trust the process years, that, this team's going to be good. And the last thing that you want to do is miss out on that momentum because you wanted to wait until they were good. Because when you wait until they're good, that's when you've already missed the bus and the tickets that were there available in the 4th row are no longer there. Now you have to sit all the way up in the 26th row. So it's very much just kind of playing to momentum and playing to how things are going to be different in the future. So like when I told people last year, like, hey, look, like this team is going to be completely different, the Commanders, this team's going to be completely different here in a year. Like, yes, things don't look great right now, but we're going to have a top 5 pick. More than likely, we're going to draft a quarterback. Go figure, the quarterback has been rookie of the week now for 6 of the first 8 weeks of the season. And unfortunately looks really good, which I did not want because I'm an Eagles fan. But you know, it's very much just selling to the situation that you have right now. So like right now, coming over to the Nationals, like Nationals did not have a successful season, in the sense that they only won 71 games. But what I tell people is like, you know, in that 71 though, you got to understand we called up two of the top three prospects in baseball. So they got some major league experience. And one of them, James Wood, he's 6'7", 245 pounds. He was up for 60 games and he had 20 stolen bases. Put 15 more pounds of muscle on that guy. And I mean, he'll probably end up turning into, you know, fingers crossed, hopefully Aaron Judge. You know, would be nice. I'm not saying that that's going to be the case, but you know, you have to play into people's emotions and very much show them like, look, like there's a lot of momentum riding this team right now. Winning 71 games with a team that averaged where their average age was 24 years old last year, like that's really good. So, you know, coming off of contracts where Patrick Corbin's now a free agent, we don't have to pay him the $25 million that we were paying him last year and be able to use that then to get free agents and such. You want to be able to know these and tell these confidently on the phone, because then you're saying it with excitement and you're getting other people excited, and that makes them want to buy in on the excitement as well. So while Philly and DC are very different sports towns, and I will always have my love and passion for Philadelphia sports. I mean, I was at the Eagles tailgate this past weekend. Like, there's nothing like it. DC doesn't tailgate like that, so it's very different cultures, very different people that you're calling on. But for the most part, the concepts of what you're talking about on the phones, when the team is good and when the team is bad, are virtually not virtually, but like somewhat the same.
Hey, Teach, to continue that question, um, knowing the DC market, it's very much probably from a prospecting perspective, looking at government or government agencies or businesses that sell into the government. So what's the difference in terms of when you're now prospecting potential customers? How are you doing it now in DC versus what you did in Philly?
Yeah, so DC is a very affluent market, I can say. So the cool thing about DC is that every single major company that you can think of has some sort of presence here. And that's because everybody wants to be close to the government some way, somehow. I was able to do a deal this past year with the Nationals with a company based out of Pittsburgh, just because they wanted to try and get in front of decision makers and people that have political affiliations that come to games. Like, people will come to us in different ways here, whereas they probably wouldn't have in Philly, just because they know that there's congressmen that are coming to games, there's senators that are coming to games. You know, I've had political parties that have bought suites to highlight, you know, top donors and such coming out to games. So there's a lot of very different parties and different companies that we're able to call on and talk to down here compared to Philadelphia. Now, while Washington, D.C. is the 22nd largest city, I believe, in the country, whereas Philadelphia is fifth, it's very different markets in a sense where there's a lot more money that is down here. So in DC, 9 of the top 10 wealthiest zip codes in America are right here surrounding Washington, DC. So that was something coming from Philadelphia I was unaware of.
Okay, good. What else? Other questions? Anybody? Yeah.
For building like longer relationships with corporate sponsors, what different tactics do you take rather than just selling tickets?
So there's a lot that goes into that, and JP's the expert on this, I would probably say. What I've well, what I've found is very much just like, you know, actually care about people. So like, you know, in sales, it's very easy to get wrapped up in loving the sales process, but then once you sell someone, leaving it be. But what I found is I very much loved getting the chance to know people. So, you know, I was able to get the chance to meet people's families and build a relationship with their families. So like when I'm talking to, you know, companies, I'm not necessarily asking them about, you know, what they're doing or if they're buying or anything. It's more so like, how are the kids, like, where'd you guys go on vacation this year? And very much caring about them as human beings outside of whatever company it is that they are affiliated with. But at the same time, then too, knowing that we are doing business, like making sure that I'm trying to throw referrals their way, making sure that I'm making introductions to them that's going to either amplify what they're already doing or, hopefully put them in contact with someone that's going to be able to do a deal with them in some way, shape, or form. So then this way, when people are thinking of sports or thinking of like, if they were going to change their affiliation from the Union or Commanders or, the Nationals, they would probably feel a little bit harder about doing so because of the relationship that I've been able to build with them. Like best example is honestly, like I was able to do the deal with Northwest over with the Commanders, and they liked everything that we were doing with them so much that they actually took people from the Commanders and put them on their marketing team. So now people that I go out and get beers with, for happy hour and such, they're actually people that I'm working directly with because they liked what they were doing so much that they were able to bring people over. So it's becoming more and more like that because of the relationships that I've built. So I hope that answers that question.
So TJ, I told the class earlier today, and I forget how we got on this conversation, but I said in some ways sales is very simple. That people do business with people they like,
Exactly.
right?
Yep.
So in saying that, right? Think about the concept of being likable. Is that just natural, or is there some sort of strategy that you have in terms of how do you build that relationship with people?
That's a great question. For me, I think it's always just come naturally. But that's because, as I said, like, you want to, if the one thing I can say is you want to be curious, I guess I can say, like, you want to actually ask questions that you deeply care about. So, like, JP can attest to this. Like, I love networking. I adore networking. I love going out. I love meeting new people. But if you're going into networking for the wrong reasons, and by the wrong reasons, I mean you're going to events mainly so you can try and sell someone right there on the spot and not necessarily care about what they're doing or, who they are or the titles that they have, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons. Like when I go and I meet people, like I'm genuinely curious. I want to know who they are. I want to know where they're from. I want to know what their family's like. Oh, you're from Ridley High School. Do you know X, Y, and Z? Oh my God, yes. And then you tell a story about how you know these people from elsewhere, and then you're building a relationship on a deeper level than just the fact that I work for the Nationals and you guys are currently students. Like there's a lot of different ways to very much build relationships. And I'm a firm believer that, people will completely forget the conversation that you have, whether that be in person, over the phone, over a Zoom call, but they will 1,000,000% remember the way that you made them feel. And that's ultimately how I go into every conversation, because whether or not they, remember exactly what I said, like they'll know that I came with a smile, I came with an upbeat attitude, and that makes people resonate with me more than, just going in directly for what it is that I'm ultimately trying to accomplish.
Yep, I agree. One of the things I said, one of the things I've told the students, and I guess I probably a few weeks ago I kind of told them this, and I keep telling them this, is that in sales, one of the ways when you start out in sales is you invest in yourself, right? So you're going to give up time, you're going to give up nights to go to networking events, and I think as much as it's things that I inherently did to create opportunities for myself, I also see you as a good example of someone that just naturally took that approach. So, I guess, is that still true to this day? You still find yourself going to these networking events, going to things, doing the stuff that maybe your coworkers won't do?
So unfortunately, DC doesn't have as many of that as Philadelphia did. But I can say, like, when I was with the Union, I was going to networking events probably 4 out of the 5 days of the week. at night and not getting home until like 8 o'clock. And the union may or may not have known that I was going and doing this because I was hourly, so I was only working from 8:30 to 5:30, but they all kind of knew that I was going to these events out after hours as well too. But that's because I was determined to very much make it in this industry. Um, I mean, as I said, like I can kind of give you guys an idea. Like as I said, I was driving that Dodge Dakota 43 miles one way during an internship, and even then during my first year on the job. So back and forth, that's 86 miles in a truck. I'm working on $8.50 an hour. When I was an intern, I was doing 86 miles for an unpaid internship, and I was the ticket intern from 8 to 12, and then I was the event operations intern from 12 to 4, and then I'd rush home and I'd work the closing shift at Dick's Sporting Goods at the Montgomeryville Mall from like 8 o'clock to like closing, and then I'd wake up at 6 o'clock the next morning and I'd do the entire thing over again. Like it's about having that drive and being able to do what others won't do in order to make it in this industry, or at least that's what I've found to be successful. Which is why I can now say at 30 years old, I've worked for 3 different professional sports teams in 3 different leagues and have the experience that I do have now.
All right. What else? Who else has a question? Anybody else? All right. Well, T-Jug, maybe I'll wrap it up with one other question, and then we'll get you out of here. So again, I appreciate you kind of jumping in here.
Of course.
Just I guess now looking back on it, now being God in your 30s, right? A new era, right? I always say like my 20s were a blur in sports, 30s where I've finally learned the industry, and now in my 40s I know better than to do some of the stuff that I probably wouldn't go back and do some of that stuff that I did back then. So what now looking back on it, what career advice would you have now for either any of the students looking to get into sports or TJ Smink, Bloomsburg, or right, Bloomsburg?
Shippensburg.
Shippensburg Senior.
We hated Blooms. Don't do that to me.
Shippensburg Senior looking to get in the sports industry. What would you tell your former self, or what would you tell current students?
Yeah, the 2 biggest things that I would say is network as much as you humanly can. Like to get into this industry, a lot of it is very much, the experience that you do have. So, you want to network as much as you can through internships. So very much get as much experience as you can, whether that be interning for, a Philadelphia team. I know people that have interned from living in New Jersey that went all the way out to Los Angeles and interned for the Rams. You don't limit yourself based on location as to where you can go and get the experience to break into sports. Because ultimately all of that is going to then compile on a resume. And with the resume, you want to make sure that you're tailoring your resume to the position that you're looking to get into. So if it's in ticket sales, you want to talk about how you were able to be the most hardworking. You were able to bring sales to XYZ. You were able to get exposure and meet people, where you're probably not going to put that on a resume if you're going for an accounting job. You want to make sure that you're tailoring your experiences to those that you're looking to get the experience in. So that's ultimately like what I would recommend. Like make sure that you're talking to anybody that you can and learning as much as you can. And I can attest to this. Like I can be a resource if it's something that you guys are passionate about and want to have one-on-ones with. Please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, where I do take calls and help people as much as I can, because I want to give back to the next generation of those looking to break into sports as well.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you very much. Good luck this off season. I know this is your busy time, so we do appreciate you sort of jumping in here. And I'll be in touch with you. So keep
Absolutely.
me up next time you're in Philly, and we'll get together, kind of catch up on things.
I can't wait for it, JP. Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.